You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendall and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and unfortunately my co-host, Mr. Nick Kendall, could not join us here today, but thankfully we have two great guests joining us here today. We're excited to bring back Andre Simone, and we're going to bring in Nick Farabaugh as well. Both guys, big draft guys, both understand what's a huge need for both of our teams. Farabaugh's a Steelers guy. Of course, you know Simone is a BSN guy from a couple episodes ago when we had him on here. But gentlemen, again, I'm just excited to have you on here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, doing awesome. Glad to be here. Glad to take on this fun little debate, though I shouldn't spoil our theme for the show yet, so I'll let you get into that.
Well, Nick, let's start with you. How about you kind of introduce yourself to our listeners? Just tell them a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you're doing, where they can find you on Twitter or articles or other podcasts that you do.
Yeah, so I'm Nick Farabaugh. I write for Steelers Depot. I recently moved over there from behind the steel curtain, and you can find me on Twitter at FarabaughFB.
Perfect. What about you, Andre?
Yeah, I'm the head of analytics at bsndenver.com, and I do also our film breakdowns on all the Broncos stuff. I do all our draft coverage. We do a weekly draft podcast that's kind of Broncos-centric throughout the year to kind of give you that yearly fix. So yeah, that's basically the old background there. And as things heat up, just getting into more and more of this draft stuff. Oh yeah, the old Twitter handle is at Andre Andre Simone Simone, and I should mention that draft podcast is on the BSN Broncos podcast. We do that every Friday, so you can check that out.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. Love listening to it, man. It's one of my weekly downloads for sure. But we also want to make sure that you can follow, I know Nick's not here, but you can follow Nick at Nick Kendall MHH. You can follow me at Carl Dumler MHH. And of course, you can follow the Twitter account for the podcast at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, gentlemen, we are talking about a position that both the Steelers and the Broncos are going to be looking at very heavy. I know free agency, the legal tampering period started here today, and deals are getting thrown out there that are just ridiculous. Yeah, I can't believe some of the money that's being thrown out there. I know we're going to be talking about the linebacker, off-ball linebacker position here today, and just seeing some of the deals that got out there, it makes me wonder if either of our teams are even going to look in free agency.
I mean, probably not for one of these top guys, unless you want to spend $16 million for CJ Mosley or something like that. I'll be interested to see what KJ Wright goes for, but that Quan Alexander deal really kind of threw any projections I had going off. So yeah.
Yeah, the only one I can really see, I think either of our teams may be going for, is a guy like Jordan Hicks. I think he goes for around maybe $10 million just because of his injury history, but other than that, I'm not really certain we're going to get much action out of an inside linebacker class that has so much money flowing into it because of KJ Wright.
Right.
Would the Steelers have enough cap to pay Hicks like $10 million, say?
Yeah, we probably would, considering that I'm guessing Big Ben's going to get an extension, so that should free up some cap. We should be releasing Morgan Burnett anytime soon. I think we'll have enough cap to get a guy like Hicks.
Boy, and to think a guy like Quan Alexander, when he was drafted, was so undervalued. Those, speedy cover, undersized linebackers were so undervalued, and now that's completely flipped in 2 years. The NFL's insane.
Well, it's like last year, the safety group. they were hardly getting any deals. And then you look this year, and Landon Collins, I mean, just got ridiculous money. There's some other guys out there looking for some pretty big money. It makes me – I know the Broncos have been talking about Adrian Amos, and I don't know. He's starting to maybe get out of even the Broncos price range if he really wants to go get some money. But, again, this linebacker group, yeah, I'm really hoping our two teams stay out of the CJ Mosley race, because it's just getting out of hand for – what, 16 million, 17 million was what we've been hearing. But before we get to some of the draft guys then that both of our teams could be really looking at, I wanted to look at just the Broncos position right now. And the Broncos bringing in Vic Fangio is a pretty big deal, because he's a big linebackers guy, but he likes very athletic guys. I mean, we saw him last year taking Roquan Smith, right, one of the more athletic linebackers to come out here in a while. And right now, the starters would be Todd Davis and Josie Jewell for the Broncos. What do you think either of those guys could really be good starters for Vic Fangio right now?
No, I mean, I don't think they fit at all, frankly. They're both kind of try-hard, classic, two-down backers, and that's not what Fangio is trying to accomplish. In another sense, though, I think, special team standout Joe Jones would be a nice fit. In that system, he might be kind of the third guy on a depth chart who could surprise you if an injury came to bear, and he's thrown into the fire, and all of a sudden he proves to be better than people would have expected, because I think he can move well, and really with as much underneath zone as they play, you don't need to be the most instinctual or really be able to turn and run. You need to be rangy and cover a lot of ground. So someone like Joe Jones would fit, but yeah, Davis definitely doesn't feel like a fit, though I'll say Davis fared better in coverage last season than I think most of us expected, and then I think most people give him credit for, and Josie Jewell just isn't a great fit.
Yeah, I don't think any of those guys is really a Vic Fangio type linebacker. I think an underrated guy maybe in free agency you can go after is LJ Fort from the Steelers. He's an athletic guy. He can. Yeah. He was really good for us. I think we're going to try and get him back. The only issue is I think he's going to price himself out, because he's going to look for that starting job, and I think he's going to get upwards of $8 to $9 million, because he really came on near the end of the year. So
yeah, that's a great name. He really stood out towards the end of the year when he was thrown into the lineup. Yep, great insights.
Does Chris Borland, when he worked with Vic Fangio, because he wasn't really known as an athletic guy, does he give you any hope with any of these two guys, Todd Davis or Josie Jewell?
I mean, at the right price, he'd be okay, but he's not that prototypical linebacker that Fangio's looking for, in my opinion. I just don't think he has that range,
Yeah, I'm with you there. I agree. I mean, I think this group's going to be overhauled over the next 2 years. I think one of these guys might end up being a starter this year, just because you can't fix everything all in one season.
Right.
But it's definitely going to be an emphasis that the Broncos haven't seen. I think that's one of the big things with the Broncos bringing in Fangio is it changes up their whole draft chart. All of a sudden, that linebacker position that the Broncos have really thrown in a lot of cast-offs. I mean, Brandon Marshall, Todd Davis were both kind of cast-offs from other teams.
So
Josie Jewell's fourth-round pick. So they just haven't really prioritized it as much as some would think. And they have looked at other guys. I know they were high on CJ Mosley. I know
right.
There were other guys, but they couldn't get to them. But right now, this is going to become a huge change, and where cornerback isn't as quite prioritized as it was maybe with Wade Phillips.
Yep. Here. Yeah, that dynamic has completely changed for the Broncos, and I don't know if people have quite come around to that yet. But, and obviously they still need cornerback depth, but you don't need high-end cornerbacks to fit the scheme, while you do need higher-end, at least athletically, linebackers to make this scheme work at its best.
Well, I think when you look at a Vic Fangio type, when you look at a Vic Fangio type defense, you need that alpha male linebacker, athletic linebacker that can take over a defense. I think that's why they went after a guy like Roquan Smith last year for the Bears, because he fits that Fangio system about as well as anyone can. So, I mean, there's a few nice athletic linebackers in the draft this year. So I think you're going to see the Broncos hop on one within the first 2 rounds. So I think you're going to see someone fill that void at least, even if the depth really doesn't fit well there this year.
Oh, for sure. I think the Broncos are going to be looking very hard. I mean, we're going to talk about some of these guys, but I know Devin White is very, very high on their board. Now, the odds of him being there at pick 10 seem to be becoming less and less, especially with Quan Alexander leaving Tampa Bay. But I know if he's there at 10, the Broncos would have a hard time passing on him. And, I mean, there's another guy we're going to talk about here today, especially with this is the debate that's going to happen. Devin Bush versus Devin White. Who's better? Who's going to have the better career in the NFL? All those kind of things. But both those guys, I mean, they just lit up the combine. They both tested in the 98th percentile for the 40-yard dash. Both of them athletic freaks. Mm-hmm. Both of them highly productive in college. I mean, everything you'd want from a player at that position. Both have proven to be alpha males. I mean, they're both great fits with what Fangio would really want on the defense. And I don't know if you can really go wrong with either. So, I mean, even though we're going to debate this topic today, I think both of them could be huge in the NFL moving forward.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And in fact, I protest a little bit because, as you just pointed out, you can't go wrong with either. So as the person that's debating from the Devin White perspective, I think I have the harder task here. So let's get that clear, Nick.
Honestly, I thought it was a hot take a while back because I've been on the Devin Bush greater than Devin White train since about December. Right. And I think more and more people have started to gravitate towards, the Devin Bush is the best linebacker in the draft type deal, especially after Mack Wilson kind of fell off a cliff at the end. So honestly, I wouldn't disagree with what you said there.
Yeah.
I guess let's just talk about this real quick before we get into the debate between those two. Let's say you had the linebackers from the last draft and those two. Where would you rank them compared to like a Roquan Smith?
Personally, for me, I don't think they even sniff Roquan's range. I think
really?
Roquan was an elite linebacker prospect. I like Devin Bush. I like Devin White. But I wouldn't even have him above guys like Darius Leonard. I mean, I was high on Darius Leonard at that. I had a first-round grade on him. But granted, I think they would have been about my linebacker 5 last year.
Okay.
Wow.
So what about like Tremaine Edmonds, Leighton Vander Esch? Would they have been above them?
They wouldn't have been above Vander Esch, but they would have been above Edmonds.
Okay.
I was a Fred Warner fan, so there's that too.
Yeah.
Fred Warner.
The Broncos were set to pick him in the second round. And then, of course, the 49ers took him 1 pick before the Broncos were supposed to pick.
Was that in the 3rd round?
Or was it 3rd round? Yeah, 3rd. You're right.
That's funny Nick says that because I see that completely differently. I was never the highest on Roquan. I thought, his ability to break plays near and around the line of scrimmage was really lacking, and his ability to disengage from blocks really underwhelmed me. And I thought he was guilty of taking some bad angles from time to time and would have some missed tackles that he could have avoided. And I had Edmonds higher than Roquan. So I think it'd be a toss-up between Edmonds and White. I think that probably Edmonds would have been I don't know. I mean, that'd be an interesting debate just because they're both raw and there's some projection there. But obviously Edmonds with the better physique and younger too. So maybe Edmonds would have had the slight edge over Devin White. But I would definitely have ranked Devin Bush ahead of Roquan because I think he's a more complete guy. And I'll happily admit I didn't see this from Darius Leonard at all. I thought the tape wasn't impressive against lower level competition, and I was really underwhelmed from what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl. And obviously, so far I've been proven to be wrong on that. But I'm not afraid to admit it. So that's kind of my view. I see it completely differently from Nick in that sense.
All right. Well, I mean that's part of the draft. Everybody watches the same tape and sees sometimes 2, 3, 4 different things. And I mean that's why we love the draft so much, is there's so much unknown with everything that goes on, and with these players transferring to the NFL and what they bring to the table. I mean, and part of it is just even fit, what team they go to. I mean, Roquan going and working with Fangio last year, great fit.
Right. Yeah, 100.
I'm interested to see how he does this year without Fangio in that defense to see if that's still a great fit for him or not.
Yep, 100%. Me too.
Yeah, fits everything for linebackers.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, all those guys we've talked about ended up in pretty nice situations. You know, McDermott's D is pretty nice for linebackers, and Edmonds had a nice season there. And, you know, Rod Marinelli's D was a nice fit for Van Der Esch as well. And I think he kind of came along a little faster than I expected. I mean, you saw the raw tools were all there, but I didn't expect him to have such an impact that early either. So fit really panned out for all the top guys last year, if you ask me.
Perfect. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break here again before we really get into the debate, but make sure to stay tuned as we have something special for you.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Well, gentlemen, let's get into exactly why we are here this afternoon, and that is to talk about Devin White and Devin Bush, the debate of the Devins. And, I mean, again, both these guys, just electric players, both are highly productive. But let's start with Devin White, and let's just look at each of these players individually, and then we'll start comparing and contrasting between the two. But, Andre, let's start with you, because you're a big Devin White guy. What is it that you absolutely love about this guy?
Oh, I mean, aside from the fact that he's one of the most athletic linebackers in the history of the combine and plays like, you know, a bat out of hell and just with a reckless abandon. What really stands out to me, what really makes him special is his ability to, when it looks like he is out of a play or he's maybe made a half a beat wrong decision, his recovery speed and ability to get back into the play is out of this world. You know, whether it's an RPO where he has the responsibility to take on the quarterback on the direct run, does that, forces the quarterback to hand it off, and then still has the speed to run down a running back in the SEC and take him down before the sticks. Or like there's an interception against A&M in 2017 where he's coming on a blitz, he's blocked, ball gets tipped by someone else. White is out of the play. There shouldn't be anywhere he gets back into it. But amazingly, he manages to come back to this tipped ball, get the interception, and then run it back. He just has these special flashes that are just phenomenal. And I think if you can clean up his instincts, get him on the board a little more, get him into watching a little more film and refining his instincts, we could be talking about one of the great linebackers of his generation. I think there's nothing he can't do, and he's still so raw. There's still so much you can refine and fix. And if he can get at that graduate level of NFL IQ, the sky's the limit for the kid.
Nick, what about you, man? What do you really like about Devin White?
Devin White is obviously a freak athletic linebacker. I haven't seen a linebacker about as athletic as him in a long time. Former running back, obviously. He has the change of direction. He has all that. He's an elite coverage linebacker. Instincts or not, I've not seen a guy that's on his level in coverage in a long time. I mean, you'll see the guy carry guys up the seam.
Yeah.
Easily. There's a play against Florida where he goes completely stride for stride with Van Jefferson right on a wheel route. I mean, it's insane. And then in that same game, you remember there's a pitch to Jordan Scarlett, who has legitimate 4.4 speed, and he runs him down easily. That was one of my favorite plays of the entire draft season and all the tape I've watched. His range is easily the best in the draft. And, you know, he's got a lot of issues, and he's raw and all of that, but Devin White absolutely is a prospect that you need to take a chance on in the first round simply based off potential alone.
Yeah.
So what would you say maybe then is that big weakness that you could see maybe keeping him from becoming an elite prospect in the NFL?
Now, I know Andre's gonna maybe not like this much, but I see a lot of Jared Davis in his game. Now, that doesn't mean I think he's going to be Jared Davis, but it's those instincts. It's those processing issues. It's the inefficiency in his tackling. He doesn't wrap up as well as he should. He nips at guys' ankles too much for me. He sometimes doesn't sift through the trash as well as he should. He needs to play with better leverage. His pad level is pretty bad, especially once he's reached. He has a lot of trouble getting off blocks. So he's raw in a lot of areas, and he has a lot of room to grow. So I'm not sure how much of a day one impact he brings to a team. Now, if you're talking about year 3, I think we're talking about a very, very good linebacker here. But obviously, if he goes to the wrong situation, those issues don't get ironed out, then you're talking about a guy that's got I think a pretty low floor too, to be combined with that obviously inexplicably high ceiling.
I think one of the stats that stuck out to me, just looking at that weakness, like you said, of that inconsistency, not always being in the right position, not always knowing exactly how to wrap up, is he did have 15 missed tackles this past season. And I mean, it just shows he's not a finished product by any means. And tackling is one of those areas where it's one of the more frustrating things. And when I look at a Fangio defense, which is known to be very, very disciplined, work out on those kind of things where they don't miss a lot of tackles, they don't make a lot of penalties, they don't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, that's one thing that's going to stick out of either one, Fangio can either improve that, or two, he's just not going to fit with Fangio because of some of those instincts not quite being up to par yet.
Yeah, though, I mean, that might be the best teacher possible for him. But, I mean, the tackles, the fact that he'll take some bad angles, he can play too reckless. He can play with too much of a reckless abandon. He'll just come like a bat out of hell, and then right as he's about to make contact, he's still running full speed. And, I mean, I've seen him just, like, run by guys. When he has them dead to rights, but he just runs by them, all you need to do is take like a side step. It's like who are those guys that tamed the bulls in Spain? Like just waving the red flag. That's what you got to do with Devin White sometimes. So, but I've seen guys with linebackers with instincts I wasn't the highest on then turn out to be better than I thought, even earlier in their careers than I thought. Leighton Vander Esch being one, or even Roquan, I thought had some of those same deficiencies and had a pretty good rookie season. So, I'm optimistic.
Yeah. I remember one of the guys that I thought you were talking about them just running right by the play. Robert and Nkendipchi, I'm saying that name wrong. Nkendipchi. We'll go with that. I remember there's plays where he was in the backfield and just ran right by the ball carrier. And then all of a sudden you look around and go, where's the football? I mean, he was an athletic freak, just those times where he just wasn't in the right position or wasn't aware of what's going on around him. Sometimes his athleticism was used very much against him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a guy that every time I watch Devin White's tape, I kind of see in him, I see Ryan Shazier there. I do see Ryan Shazier there.
Wow.
Ryan Shazier was a raw product coming out of Ohio State. By no means was he finished. He played with that aggressiveness. He played with reckless abandon. He overran guys. He overpursued. He did all that, and of course, he then becomes one of the best linebackers in the NFL before his injury. And I could see Devin White having a very similar career arc to Ryan Shazier.
That's a great NFL comp there, and projection of possible NFL career. What do you guys think is his best fit? 3-4 or 4-3 defense?
Oh, that's interesting. I think really in a 4-3 you could play every position. But I think, ideally he develops into a weak side backer who brings a little more physicality than, your typical weak side cover linebacker. As long as you're the weak side guy, 4-3, 3-4, I think more or less the assignments are the same and the coverage duties can be the same. So, that's where I see his best fit.
Yeah, it's not much of an interchangeable fit for him. I see him. He could fit in anything. He could fit as a Mike. I could see he'd be a great Mac though in a 3-4 too. Being that play caller, being that alpha male in a 3-4. I mean, I think that's a great fit for him too, because not only do you give him the reins to the defense right away, but you allow him to use his athleticism fully in a 3-4. It's just that it's a bit more expansive than a 4-3 in that regard.
And I think one of the great things about both of these guys, you talked about there, that versatility. I mean, that they can cover, they can help in the run game, they can work through some traffic if they need to. They can get after the quarterback. Both these guys were great at blitzing. I mean, that's an underrated quality that they bring to the table. And I mean, that's perfect for especially like our two defenses that we're talking about, the Steelers and the Broncos, of needing those versatility guys that can do just about anything, and you can keep them on the field every single play because teams won't know what you're going to do with them.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I mean, you guys both make a good point there about his best fit, though I do worry in year one him being the quarterback of the defense, but I think that's where he needs to project to be down the line for sure.
Hey, the Steelers threw Ryan Shazier into the fire year one. They gave him the reins of the defense. He was a raw processor. I think Devin White will be fine if he's given the reins to the defense, but I get the concern completely.
All right, well, let's move on here then to Devin Bush and just kind of break him down a little bit. Nick, this is your guy. You think he's the best linebacker in this draft. What do you love about Devin Bush? Every
time that you watch Devin Bush's tape, you see a smart processor. He doesn't bite on all these false keys. He's a very smart player, but he plays with that speed that he showed off at the combine. He plays with aggressiveness. He's more fluid than I think people give him credit for, and I think he's not a great coverage linebacker. Obviously, he's not Devin White level or Mac Wilson level coverage linebacker. But right. I think he's more than enough disciplined in zone. He's a disruptor at the catch point. He's made so many plays at the catch point. And there was one play that stuck out to me about Devin Bush. It was in the Michigan State game. He's on a receiver, and he carries him on a streak right down the sideline, flips his hips, looks at the ball, makes a play on it. It's an incomplete pass. He played like a cornerback. Yeah. So, I mean, in man-to-man coverage, I don't have as much problems with him either. I think he's a versatile guy. He gives you that athleticism still. He's got a relentless motor. He flies. And he's a good tackler, too, I think. So, honestly, I think Devin Bush is a polished guy, but he still has upside, too, because he's not finished at all, because we know the guy does not get off blocks well at all. What about you, Andre?
Yeah, no, I mean, Nick said it perfectly. I think you're just getting – he's maybe as, outside of kind of the elite graded guys in the top 3 to 5 in this class, I think few prospects are safer than Devin Bush promises to be. He's just such a sure tackler. Everything he does is so sound. You rarely see him miss assignments or make poor reads or poor plays or plays that affect his team in a negative way. That's what I love about him. And then he's got that athleticism, even though, he's, slightly smaller, though really, I mean, is he any smaller than the Deion Joneses or Quan Alexanders of the world? Not really. And I mean, as we saw at the combine, he's basically Devin White's exact same size. Despite that, though, being slightly smaller, he can be so physical. He can finish tackles just marvelously. And, he can really read openings in the line and strike and get in opposing backfields nicely. He's just a very complete, very safe player who, has all the skills you want in a modern linebacker.
What is it then that you think could really hold him back from being a quality player in the NFL?
I mean, that's the thing. I don't see his floor as being I see his floor as being pretty damn high. So I think that regardless, you're going to get a solid starter. on your team in whatever scheme you want to run. There are times where, he needs to take on blockers, whether it's as a blitzer or especially in the running game, where you just can't disengage. And that physicality we can see as a tackler doesn't necessarily show up when taking on blockers. I'll see him get too handsy in coverage, especially when having a turn and run with running backs or tight ends. And I mean, as Nick pointed out, he can follow wide receivers. So it's not a matter of coverage skills or athleticism. It's just a matter of, being less handsy and less physical and trusting your instincts, trusting your athleticism, and getting your hands off. But I think you're kind of picking small little things about Devin Bush that you don't like. But ultimately, his floor is very high in that of a pretty solid starter in this league.
Yeah, I completely see everything you're saying. I think part of it, I don't think he's fully filled out his frame yet. I think he does need to get in the weight room a bit. That's possibly a reason why, he doesn't always block shed. His hands aren't as active as they should be when he's engaging blocks.
Yeah.
But then he can sift through the trash pretty well. So that's
agreed.
Obviously, when you can't block shed, can you sift through the trash? Mm-hmm. Devin Bush can do that.
Yeah.
So my issue with him, and if he's going to be an elite level linebacker, is can he fix that issue of block shedding?
Yeah.
Because if he's bad against the run, is he always going to be a 3-down linebacker then? Because then you need a thumper, then you need a buck, because you can't always trust him out there on the run. So, I mean, and honestly, the issue with Devin Bush isn't that he can't, defend wide zones. He's great against zones. Outside run are where they go to die is Devin Bush. It's those inside zones that it's duo. Oh my goodness. He cannot beat a duo. I don't know why. Yeah. He always gets reached against duo. It is watch the Ohio State game and you'll just see the guy reached every single time. Michael Jordan had him in his clutches a ton of times that game. So that's where you're gonna see the floor of Devin Bush. I think his best NFL comparison is Eric Kendricks from the Vikings right now.
Yeah, that's a good one. A little smaller than Kendricks, but that's a good one.
Yeah, he's smaller, but I think he has the same type of impact. He has the same coverage skills. He has the same deficiencies in run defense. And Kendricks is a solid top 15 linebacker in the league. So, I mean, this is no slight to Devin Bush at all. So I think you're going to get a really, really solid player with a high floor and I think a pretty significantly high ceiling too.
Yeah, and that's maybe my greater concern is I do worry to some extent, is he a bit more maxed out than Devin White? It should, as Nick was talking, I was thinking, right now, if he's going to beat a blocker, he needs to beat him to their spot. It's not going to be from disengaging. And the other thing that's slightly concerning, again, I spoke very highly of him just a second ago, so take it with a grain of salt, is his production was down last season. And maybe you can explain more of that, Nick. But, so I think when you put him head-to-head in the last 2 years, White versus Bush, it does feel like despite all his deficiency and how raw he is, Devin White still had a high-end impact and production. Bush still had a significantly high-end impact and production, but that production has been down even though he has less deficiencies. So that's where I get into, has he maxed out a little more than we think for a top 15 pick? I mean, it feels like that should be the consensus right now is we're talking about a top 15 guy, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's what I think about Devin Bush. He's going to be a top 15 pick, and he should be, rightfully. Obviously, Devin White is the highest ceiling, maybe easily of any linebacker in this draft. It's not even close. He's got the ceiling to be probably the best linebacker in the NFL, quite honestly, with that athleticism. But I think Devin Bush still has room to grow. Obviously, if he can somehow figure out how to use his hands better, disengage, and start really, he can shoot gaps really well already. But if he can start shooting gaps and disengaging and having gap discipline, that's when you're going to see him take a jump from, okay, this is just a really, really good linebacker to this is an elite level linebacker. This is a perennial all-pro linebacker type. So, I mean, you're going to see he's maxed out for sure, and he's maxed out more than Devin White is for sure. And I think when you're talking about a guy that is maxed out and you're going to have that high floor, high ceiling type deal, are you going to take the risk on the low floor, high ceiling, or are you going to take the risk on the high floor, high ceiling? And at this time, if you're a team that's looking to get back into the fold of things, you might want to just take the high floor, high ceiling guy instead of taking that huge risk on a guy like Devin White, who I think has a lower floor than some are thinking he has right now.
Alrighty, well, we're going to take a quick break, but we will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Well, how about this right now? I mean, I know you guys have really broke these guys down, and you've probably already said a little bit of your thoughts on this, but let's start with you, Andre, talking about Devin White. You're in that draft room. And here's your chance to pound the table for this guy. Why you take him over Devin Bush?
His lateral quickness and recovery speed. And actually, it's funny Nick mentioned that Jordan Scarlett tackle, because that's exactly the example I was thinking about when I was talking about him being able to, clog the gap for the running back or for the quarterback on an RPO, and then chase down a running back as well. And you see that countless times. You can look at the A&M games from the last 3 years. Trayvon Williams, who I think is one of the most underrated and talented, at least athletically, running backs in this class. He chases him down when, again, it's one of those where his responsibility is the B gap, forces Williams into the C gap, then chases Williams down, just in a split second, and doesn't just tackle him before the sticks, strips the ball out and gets a fumble. He's that on top of the fact that right now he has a greater impact in and around the line of scrimmage. It kind of shows up statistically, like 26 tackles for a loss compared to 18.5 for Bush, for example. And he just plays like a bigger linebacker, even though size-wise they were almost identical. You're talking about like a 3-pound difference and less than an inch difference at the combine. White just plays bigger. He's more filled out. That reckless abandon he plays with shows up when he's taking on blockers or trying to disengage. Even though that's still far from an area that's a strength for him, he shows those flashes where it's like, if he can be developed, watch out. All these different factors give him such a high upside that, that's the argument I'm making as I'm pounding the table for him in my war room.
All right. Well, Nick, your turn to pound the table for your guy.
Devin Bush, obviously, compared to Devin White, has a much higher floor there. But the reason Devin Bush is my favorite linebacker in the class is simply not just because he's safe, but because he's safe and has upside. If you have a good linebacker coach that you trust in that room, you're already bringing in a guy that's great in coverage. You're already bringing in a guy that can process extremely well. You're bringing in a day one impact, but you're bringing in a day one impact that has room to grow in year 2, year 3, year 4. If you trust your linebackers coach enough to fix his block shedding issues, to fill out that frame, to really allow him to come down, block shed, do all of that, and make an impact in the run game, that is where you're going to become, the true reapers of a Devin Bush pick. Because Devin Bush, I think, already is that safe pick, but you're also betting on high upside with Devin Bush. So I think you're going to be taking a guy who, regardless of whether you pick him or not, he's going to be a dang good player.
It's funny. In a sense, our two arguments are, we're both knocking our guy a little more for where they're at now and using that as a weapon to say, they have more upside than you think, or that upside makes them the more valuable guy. It's really interesting. Sorry to cut you off, Carl.
No, you're fine. I mean, and I think really both of you are pretty much saying you can't go too wrong with either of these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both very high, like you've already said, high ceiling guys. And I mean, high motor, they have pretty much everything that you want when you're trying to really take a guy that you think could become a star in the NFL. And then it helps that it's also a position of need. But and really the NFL just kind of showed with Quan Alexander's contract, what CJ Mosley's going to get, that this is becoming a lot more valuable position. I mean, you see teams like New England who love to take advantage of teams and saying, we're going to make you keep those bad coverage linebackers on the field. We're going to make you have to use a weakness by the different formations that we run at you. And and so then to be able to get a guy that's a true 3-down linebacker is becoming a lot more valuable in today's NFL, I would say.
Oh, for sure. You're starting to see linebackers and safety even. They're starting to play almost like it's starting to intermix, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Landon Collins is a safety, but he's also a linebacker. Devin White plays kind of like a safety, if we're being honest. That athleticism, the way he's used in coverage, the way he plays fast downhill, they're starting to kind of intermix now. You're starting to see sub-package football, and that's why these athletic linebackers are so important to defenses nowadays.
Yeah, frankly, I'm surprised this trend hasn't kind of picked up more steam in recent years. And I felt like the last couple of years we've seen safeties get undervalued, whether it's free agency or guys like Malik Hooker or Minka Fitzpatrick dropping, where safeties aren't properly getting valued. But I do think at least in the draft we have started to see these athletic linebackers get valued a bit more, and finding those Quan Alexander's in round 3 isn't becoming as easy anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, you saw last year you had Roquan Smith, Tremaine Edmonds, Leighton Vander Esch all go. Rashaan Evans, that's another one there in the first round. And second round, again, you're seeing some other guys, Darius Leonard.
Right.
So, I mean, it's definitely becoming more and more prominent where these guys are going early. And if you want to get your guy, you got to get him in the first 2 rounds. You're not going to find too many in those late round prospects that end up working out for you as much as you could in the past. And because they're being called to be very versatile guys that can help in the run game and help in the pass game and not present a weakness to either side of things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just watch the Broncos last year. So many teams killed them by putting their best receiver in the slot, catching the Broncos in base, especially in the red zone. And we're just giving up touchdowns left and right with matchups we had no business being in, with like Josie Jewell covering Sammy Watkins or Travis Kelce or DeAndre Hopkins, and it's just like, we were never going to win that matchup. We were doomed from the start,
Yeah. I specifically remember a play of Josie Jewell in coverage against Hopkins and just shaking my head going, what are we doing? Yeah. That was never going to work out. I mean, it was the quarterback knew exactly where he's going with the football from the very start of the play. And who wouldn't? That's right. An easy matchup.
100%.
You get a guy like Devin White or Devin Bush there. I still say Hopkins has the advantage, obviously, but it's at least a little bit more competitive.
Yeah, honestly, I will never forget that Los Angeles Chargers game in Pittsburgh last year. I can't remember the amount of times Keenan Allen was on a freaking linebacker.
Yeah.
Always was. It was always John Bostic and Vince Williams. They were getting absolutely torched. You have to have an athletic linebacker. Too bad LJ Fort got hurt halfway through that game, because otherwise we would have been probably much better off.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have one final question here for you guys. And if our teams miss out on, say, Devin Bush, Devin White, both of them, who's that next linebacker that you're pounding the table for?
For me, it's a late riser. He showed out at the combine. He ran a 4.51. He's got great tape, and no one else talked about him before the combine. But Blake Cashman. It has to be Blake Cashman. I'm such a huge fan of Blake Cashman. He plays so hard. He plays aggressively, just like Devin White and Devin Bush do. Honestly, his instincts are fantastic. He's great in coverage. He has impressive ball skills for a linebacker, too. I think that Blake Cashman is that type of linebacker that you look at and you say, this is a great day 2 value guy who we think is probably not has nearly as high a ceiling as Devin White or Devin Bush, but he's going to be a really solid starter for us because he's a 3-down linebacker that can make an impact from day 1.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I mean, I still need to dig in a little further on Cashman, but what I've seen and him coming downhill is really impressive too. I guess we talked about this last time I was on the show. Terrell Hanks, I'm still really high on. I know the combine was disappointing, but sadly got injured while running that 40. So throw that 40 out. This is a guy who, it's like we were just talking about. He could be a safety linebacker hybrid with how he's used in coverage, how he can flex out and cover the slot flawlessly. He's Devin White times 1,000 for how raw he is and how his instincts need to be refined. That's the one issue. And I think another guy who'd already stood out on tape to me and really impressed me at the combine was Drew Tranquill of Notre Dame. I didn't expect him to test like that. He's another former safety playing linebacker, so he fits the mold of what we've been talking about all along. I think Tranquill would just be a perfect fit in this defense. And I'm hoping maybe late day 2, early day 3 he could be there. So, hey, that'd be great value too. Yeah,
he's a guy that I've been really high on. We did kind of a defensive draft where you could only take players from this draft to build a team. And he was one of my linebackers that I took because I love his ability to show up in coverage and that athleticism that he can bring to the table.
Yeah. About Cashman, Nick, you think he'll be like you said day 2, you mean round 3, or you think he might go even higher than that and sneak into round 2?
I think he's this year's Darius Leonard. He's going to rise quickly.
Interesting.
I wouldn't be shocked if he's the 3rd linebacker off the board, although I think the NFL is still high on Mack Wilson.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think we should I don't think we should forget about Mack Wilson.
Agreed.
It was him and Devin White before the start of the year. Some had Devin White, some had Mack Wilson. And I think Mack Wilson might be the best coverage linebacker in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I don't think you can discard him. I mean, he's very raw. Very raw. He's not a good instinctive player, but he's got a lot of upside to him as well. So, if you take Mack Wilson early day 2, do I really have a problem with it? No.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Good point. Yeah, I mean, and to me, Mack still is the 3rd best linebacker in this class. I wanted to throw out a couple other names, though, just for funsies.
Right. Well, it's one of those, I mean, it's everybody's last memory. What did you do for me lately? And the playoffs were not good for him. And so everybody just has seen him drop dramatically. And I think sometimes those guys who have been hyped up for so long, they start getting nitpicked almost too much.
Mm-hmm.
You start looking at all the things they can't do instead of all the things they can do.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, there's some plays Mack Wilson made in coverage that are just wild. Some of those interceptions he pulled off last year are just ridiculous. So, yeah, you can't go wrong. I think this linebacker class might be a little underrated for its depth because it's not a bad class at all.
Yeah, it's not a bad class, but it's a lot of projection with the class. You see a lot of raw guys. Terrell Hanks is my linebacker 5 at this point, and he's super raw. I only have Wilson, Cashman, White, and Bush above him, so I like him. I would take him on day 2. Jermaine Pratt fits that mold too.
Yeah.
Former safety,
Yep.
good in coverage. He's stiff-hipped, but he's good. You have Joe Giles Harris. He's maybe not as athletic as everyone, but he's so smart and instinctive that he's actually a pretty decent coverage guy, that he's a day 1 impact. So, I mean, you have choices in this linebacker class. You have good options through day 2. and I don't think it's as weak as a linebacker class as people think it is. It's not. I think we're just spoiled by last year's linebacker class, honestly, and I think that's why people think it sucks.
Yeah. I'll say this about Hanks. Both watching his tape against tougher competition and seeing him at the Senior Bowl, he looks so much better than Darius Leonard did to me pre-draft. It's just crazy. Leonard really struggled in those coverage drills in Mobile, and Hanks looked like a cornerback, and even the tape is, oof. So, yeah, I have lots of projection, but, boy, you hit on one of these guys, you're going to be happy for a long while.
I still remember one of the plays from Hanks' tape. I think it was against Nevada. He comes down blitzing off the edge to the tackle, and then he realizes that the tight end slips out. He comes back, the quarterback throws it, and he makes one of the most absurd plays I've ever seen a linebacker making coverage. His hip fluidity is scary good.
Yeah.
He's very, very good in coverage.
He looks like a nickel corner sometimes. And that's an area of his game. You put him out just one-on-one coverage with a tight end or even a receiver, I have no worries. It's when he needs to read and dissect and kind of sift through the trash where, he needs some work. But, boy, he's impressive, yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on and being a part of this debate. This was great having this conversation with you guys, and I've definitely learned a little bit more about this linebacker class. I haven't looked into it as much as I should have. I'm still digging into this group a little bit more, but I really do appreciate you guys coming on. And, I mean, Bronco fans, make sure you get out there and follow these guys. You can follow Nick at Farabaugh FB. And, of course, you can follow Andre at Andre Simone. And, I mean, both these guys have a lot of great work out there. Make sure to follow them. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find me on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, and, of course, my co-host Nick Kindle at Nick Kindle MHH. And make sure to check out their work, and make sure to check out our work at Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. You can head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment. Your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can also follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all of our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and, of course, at BTB Football Pod. For AJ and Nick, I'm Carl, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.